Hello and welcome to another reading vlog type of situation. This time I will be reading books for the semi-finals of the Booktube Prize. I was a judge for the octo-finals and then I took a break for the quarter-finals, but now we're back into it. I got assigned Group A in fiction, which I was very glad about because one, I already have read one of the books, and two, there was one book in Group B that I DNF'd earlier this year, and then I also got rid of that book, so I didn't really want to read that book again, but especially not buy the book again to then read it again. So yeah, very glad I got Group A. The books that I will be reading are Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, Foster by Keegan, How High We Go in the Dark, I can't remember the author's name, Nightcrawling by Leila Mottley, which is the book I've already read, and Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this round. There's definitely some books that I maybe wouldn't have read if it wasn't for the Booktube Prize, and some that were already on my radar. But yeah, I'm hoping I'm gonna enjoy all of them. I have already started in Our Wives Under the Sea. So this is about two women. They are a couple, I think they're married, but I'm not sure. But they are a couple, and one of them has been on an expedition in a submarine. And this expedition only was supposed to take about 3 weeks, but she ended up being away for about 6 months. And the book sort of starts when she has just come back for a few weeks. And we alternate chapters, one from the view of her wife, that sort of talks about how she has changed after she's come back. She behaves very differently, she does things that she hasn't done before, but also physically she's changed. And the two of them find it really hard to sort of connect with each other again, because they don't really talk to each other about what has happened. And then the other chapters are of the wife that went into the submarine, and it sort of starts from the day that they went down into the sea, and sort of quickly finding out that something was wrong in the submarine. So yeah, we're following that and sort of learning about what has happened. I'm about a quarter of the way through right now. So far I really like the writing style. I like the imagery that it conjures up. I think this exploration of like a couple where one of them has gone through something, and you don't know what yet, but has come back a changed person, and then they sort of have to navigate a new way of being together. I think that whole thing is really interesting. I must say, up to now I'm liking it, but I'm not loving it yet. I feel like there is something missing just to give it that little extra, but I do think that we are at a point in the story where something is about to happen. Yeah, I think we're kind of at a turning point right now. So yeah, we'll see how we get on with this. Hello, so I finished Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I think in the last update I was saying that I was enjoying the book, but still waiting for that little something extra. And also that I thought I might be at a turning point in the book, because it seemed like something big was going to happen. Turns out it didn't actually happen. It kind of continued at the same pace, but it's a book that sort of quietly started growing on me. From what I've heard about the book before, I thought it would be a bit more creepy and a bit more grotesque, and it does have elements of that, but I feel like that's only a small part of the story. So Leila, which is the woman who goes away in the submarine, she comes back changed, and it's hinted throughout the book that something big happened on that expedition. So you have this tension of wanting to find out what has happened on that expedition. You know, what they saw and what they experienced when they were at the bottom of the ocean. And all that has a bit of a supernatural, creepy vibe to it. And it's like a big compelling aspect of the story, and it makes you keep reading, but I wouldn't say it's like the heart of the story. I think what is the heart of the story is this relationship between Leah and Mary, her wife, and how it is changed after Leah comes back. You especially read the perspective of Mary in this, how to care and to love someone who has possibly gone through something traumatic, and you know, they come back changed, both physically and mentally. It explores how far do you go along with them in this new behavior, or do you like cling on to how they were before, and will they ever get to return to their old self, or be like they were before, or is it a sort of new normal that you have to get used to? And I think in that it parallels to maybe something like caring for someone with Alzheimer's, you know, caring for someone who is not longer the person you knew before. I really liked how it explored all that. There's also this sense of solitude or loneliness in this book, you know, especially with Mary, because she didn't know what was going on with Leah. You know, she felt it was difficult to talk to her friends about it, because she couldn't explain it, and she was afraid people might not believe her. So there was this real sense of isolation and loneliness to the story as well, which I think anyone in a relationship with someone who is unwell, and especially unwell in a way that can't be explained, or isn't as widely accepted in society, anyone could relate to that. I did end up really enjoying this, even though it was different from what I expected it to be. I feel like it's the kind of book where you can read it multiple times and pick up on different things in the book, sort of depending on where you are in your life yourself, and that to me is always a sign of a well-crafted book. And then I started reading How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. I should have looked up how to pronounce the author's name, but there we go. So this is a book that is sort of set up as a collection of interlinked short stories. So the premise is that it sort of starts in 2031, and because of permafrost melting, a virus gets released from the permafrost in Siberia, and it unleashes a plague on humanity that is affecting mostly children. Anyway, so that's the setup of the book, and like I said, it is interlinked short stories. So you have these stories that are set either during or after this virus gets released. I think up until like 100 years from when the virus gets released, and in every story you follow like different people and a different situation, but they do sort of logically follow up from each other, just sort of in the world that they are set in. I am about halfway through this book, and I'm having very mixed feeling about this right now. I really loved the first 2 3-ish stories. I thought that they were just so well done, and you know, I was thinking this could be a new favorite book because I like this sort of dystopian aspect of it, of something that is strange to us as a society now, but still familiar that it could possibly happen. And I liked sort of figuring out what happened with the virus and how the society reacted to it. I just felt like the stories were like a proper story in themselves, like they could stand on their own, but then they also sort of worked one after the other. But then as I continued, the stories just started interesting me less and less, and I felt they were getting a bit boring, like I sort of knew what was going on, and yeah, they just felt a bit flat. So I'm hoping it'll pick up a bit more again. I feel like I'm looking for something a bit more exciting to happen in like the general timeline, because now it just feels a bit repetitive. So yeah, it could go either way, because yeah, the beginning, like I said, was really strong, so it might pick up again, but it might not. We'll have to read on to see what will happen. I finished How We Go in the Dark, and in the last clip I was saying that I thought the beginning was really strong, but then in the middle there was a couple of stories that I didn't like as much, and I was wondering which way it was going to end. And I'm very pleased to report that I ended up really loving this book. It definitely picked up again after my last update. Like I said, this is written as more a collection of short stories, and they ended up being a lot more interlinked than I first noticed. And I think interlinked short stories, when they're done well, they're probably one of my favorite kinds of books. In the first round of the Booktube Prize, I read The Candy House by Jennifer Egan, and that I was quite disappointed by, because I felt the connection between the stories was just too complicated, but this really got it right. I feel like each of the stories stands on its own, but then connecting them together is what makes this really great book altogether. And I think this would be great for a reread as well, and sort of seeing the things that are revealed at the end of the book, and then going back with that knowledge and seeing, you know, if that makes you read the book differently, because I think it will. I loved how, like, sort of genre-wise, it was quite broad. It both had stories that were a lot more realistic, like they were dystopian, but they were very much set in our world. Obviously this book is about a plague, and will have a lot of similarities to the COVID pandemic. And yeah, there were definitely some recognizable things in here in how sort of people reacted to the pandemic, and how as a society we changed after that. But then also book has this real sci-fi element to it as well, like some stories were like proper sci-fi space exploration kind of stories. So yeah, I loved how it had this spectrum from like realistic to sci-fi, and like anything in between. And I think what tied all these stories together was that in every story the people in there were trying to help someone or do something good, and this could be on a very personal level, you know, helping your neighbors, helping your loved ones, but also on a much grander scale, like doing research that would bring a cure to this plague, and you know, sort of wanting to help humanity more as a whole rather than on like a personal level. Yeah, I really loved it. It definitely made me tear up a few times as well. A very ambitious novel, but I feel like the author got it right. So yeah, that was How High We Go in the Dark. Next I will probably pick up Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Wait, I have it right here. Obviously, this book is very, very popular. It won the Pulitzer Prize, it won the Women's Prize, and that makes me a little bit scared because I'm afraid the hype will influence my reading. Ideally, I will probably wait a while before picking this up to let the hype die down a little bit. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm still quite excited to read this just because I love Barbara Kingsolver's writing. I've read quite a few of her books and I loved most of them. I'm going into this pretty blindly, you know, considering so many people talk about this book. I still don't really know what it is about. I know it is sort of a retelling based on David Copperfield. I know it deals with the opioid crisis, and that's about all I know. So yeah, I am pretty excited, but I'm trying to keep my expectations low. I'll let you know how I get on. I just want to very quickly give you my first impressions of Demon Copperhead. I read about 30 pages, so very early on. I'm really enjoying the setting and the characterization. This is what I'm used to from Barbara Kingsolver's writing. She is very good at describing the scene and like instantly transporting you to a new environment. I love that aspect. The protagonist of the book, Demon Copperhead, he has a very specific tone of voice and I'm enjoying it up till now. I'm a little bit worried that reading almost 600 pages of it might start to grate a little bit. So we'll have to see how that develops. That's sort of the only worry I have right now. But other than that, from the first 30 pages, I can really see why this book has been so popular. Just because it's very unique and I haven't really read anything that I can compare it to. So yeah, we're off to a good start. Hello, I am pretty much exactly halfway through in Demon Copperhead. And the jury is still out on this one. I'm not sure if I'm loving it as much as everybody else is. I mean, I'm not disliking it, but it's all fine. Like, the writing is fine. Like, I'm interested enough in the story to keep picking it up and wanting to know what happens, but I'm just not loving it. For the story being so miserable, this is about a boy who grows up in poverty. He becomes an orphan very early on in the story and he grows up in foster care. He is witnessing and is also the victim of a lot of abuse. You know, for all that misery in this boy's life, I'm just not feeling it. I feel very flat when I'm reading it. And the misery in this is relentless. It is, at the moment where I'm now, things sort of seem okay in Demon Copperhead's life, but you know it's going to be short-lived because that seems sort of the point of the story, showing this sort of unescapable misery. You know, this being doomed from the beginning kind of story. And in that way it reminded me a lot of A Little Life, which I also wasn't a big fan of, in that it feels that we, the reader, are being entertained by the bad luck of other people. So yeah, unfortunately I'm not feeling it yet. I'm still going to continue it, obviously. You know, there's enough in the story that makes me want to keep reading, so it's not, you know, it's not all bad. But in the 3 other books I've read for this round of the Booktube Prize, I've always had a moment where I got that book tingle, which is, you know, when you're reading a book and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, this is why I love reading, this is why I love literature and why I love books. And I've had that in all the other books I read so far, you know, even if it wasn't all the way throughout the book, I've had it at moments, and I haven't had that with this book yet. So yeah, that's that. I still have half of the book to go, obviously, so like I said, the jury is still out, but I do feel like I'm still waiting for it to give me that book tingle. So I finished Demon Copperhead, and in the last clip I was saying that I wasn't sure about it, and that I wasn't loving it, and I'm afraid my opinion didn't change for the rest of the book. And I've been thinking about what it was that made me feel a little bit meh about a book that is so well loved. I mean, it won the Pulitzer Prize, it won the Women's Prize for Fiction. Everyone just has been raving about this book. And what I keep on seeing back in reviews is that people who love this book say that they loved Demon, the main character, from the very first page, saying he's so distinct and he's so memorable. And I say yes, he has a very distinct voice, and I'd say his story is very memorable. You know, the things he goes through are memorable. I just didn't feel like I got to know him as a character, which then made me confused about some of the choices that he made, which then in turn made me less interested in his story. You know, or not less interested, but it made me care less about his story. And I'm not saying this is a bad book at all. I mean, even if I wasn't as interested in Demon's story as everyone else seems to be, Barbara Kingsolver still managed to keep me engaged enough and wanted to finish this book, which is almost 600 pages, so that's no small feat. I think Barbara Kingsolver had a mission with this book, and that was to give a voice to the people of the Appalachian region, to set right some stereotypes. I'm not sure Kingsolver is the person to do it, but I'll stay away from that discussion right now because I am definitely not the person to have an opinion on that. It's just that throughout the book I kept on thinking, oh, I'd love to read a non-fiction on this topic, or a memoir, you know, something like that. There were definitely a few moments in the book where the author hinted to what it was like for the characters to grow up knowing that there were these stereotypes about them, and what that meant for them, and how they wished they were seen as a more diverse group or a more diverse region. But I wanted a lot more from that. I wanted to see a lot more diversity in the book, but for me it ended up still being quite stereotypical. I think that was another thing that kept on coming back throughout the book, that it has these moments of brilliance, and I kept on thinking, yes, give me more of that. For example, Demon Copperhead has this special connection to nature, and it only comes up a few times in the book, but every time I did I was like, yes, give me more, because I know that that's what Kingsolver does best. You know, there's also so many great characters in this book who I thought had a lot of interesting things to say, but I felt like we didn't get enough time with them, and I think that is also something that Kingsolver does really well, is show a community and a group of people, and how people are connected in different ways, and you know, how they are connected throughout the generations. And again, I wanted a lot more from them. So yeah, I felt like there was moments of sparkle, but the book as a whole just didn't shine for me, unfortunately. You know, I really wanted to love this book, and I didn't. And that made me also think a lot about hype on a book, because honestly I was afraid that this might happen. This is why I rarely read hyped books, especially not when they are at peak hype. You know, I might read them a few years later, and I wonder if I would have enjoyed this book more if someone had said, you know, this is a backlist title from about 10 years ago, and I think I probably would have enjoyed this more. And I feel like that's also what's going to be interesting when I have to rank these books at the end of this round, because for most of the 6 books I'm reading, I already had an idea of how much I would like them. You know, I already had a ranking before I started of how interested I was in the book and how excited I was about the books. Like the book I'm reading now, Carrie, Soto is Back, I would have never picked up if it wasn't for the Booktube Prize. Maybe if I read it for a book club or something, but I was never interested in reading this book. So therefore this book can never disappoint, because it doesn't have any standard in my mind it has to fulfill. So yeah, let's move on to Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Like I said, I have started this book. It is about Carrie Soto, and right at the beginning of the book you see her watching a tennis match, and you learn that she is a retired professional tennis player who was once the greatest player of the world, and she holds the record of the most Grand Slam titles. And at that tennis match, which is the US Open final, she witnesses her record being matched. And she decides there and then that she doesn't want to lose that record and she wants to come out of retirement. And then we go back in time to see how Carrie Soto started in tennis and how she became the greatest tennis player of all time. So this book reads super quickly. I read like 80 pages in one sitting. In contrast to Demon Copperhead, I would read like maybe 30 pages at a time. It has some interesting commentary on women in sports, which I liked. But it is still all about tennis, and I knew that going in, but it is literally tennis on every page, and I don't care about tennis. But yeah, like I said, the writing is very fast-paced and engaging, and I think I will fly through this. So yeah, I'll update this when I'm finished. I have finished Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this ended up really being like I thought it would be, which unfortunately meant that I'm not going to give it a very high rating. Taylor Jenkins Reid is a very beloved author, and I feel like her books, even though they are very different in topic, there is a sort of a formula to them, or a certain style to them, which is like a very fast-paced, plot-driven book with a strong female main character that has some sort of interesting social commentary woven throughout. And I think she does that very well, and I can see why a lot of people like her books. In this book, again, she got me engaged throughout the book. It has a main character who you are rooting for, even if she isn't always a very likable character. I liked how she said some things about women in sports in this book. So yeah, I feel like this book definitely has a lot going for it. But the reason I didn't enjoy it is that I felt like everything in this book was on the page. The story is linear, it's very much what you see is what you get. Any sort of struggle the characters had were written out on the page. It just felt like there wasn't anything in between the lines. It was just what you see is what you get. It was just there on the page and everything was spelled out. I just don't really enjoy books where I don't get to think for myself and I don't get to add my own thoughts and my own ideas to the story. So yeah, even though I knew I probably wasn't gonna like this, I went into this with an open mind. But unfortunately it didn't surprise me in any way. And even considering the type of book it is, I still felt like it dragged in the middle, and it talked a lot about tennis. And I knew it was going to be about tennis, but I felt like some of the moments that the author talked about training and the matches and the tactics, she could have spent more of her time going into the more social commentary of it, which I thought was the interesting part of the story. So, yeah, that's that. I don't think this is going to advance to the next round for me. And then I also finished Foster by Claire Keegan, which to me was like the total opposite of Carrie Soto. I really love this book. It's a very slim little novella. I think it's 88 pages, and even like there isn't much writing on one page. So this is about a young girl, and she's taken by her father to some relatives to live on their farm for the summer. Very early on in the book, you learn that her parents are really very poor, and the mother is expecting another baby, and it's just too many mouths to feed. So she goes to live with these relatives on their farm, and I'm not gonna tell much more than that, just because it's such a slim novel and I don't really want to give away any of the plot. And this was just beautiful. The book is incredibly atmospheric, even though it's very short. The author takes her time to describe the house and the landscape and just the environment, and she does this very economically. She only uses a few words, but that is enough to have. But that was enough to have this complete picture in my mind. And with what I said with in Carrie Soto, where there's everything on the page, here there's very little on the page. The things that are said in the book are very simple. It is very much sort of day-to-day life. Not much actually happens in this book, but it is. But you know, everything is sort of happening in between the lines. There is this sort of undertone of sadness. There's a slight undertone of dread in this book, so that even though not much happens, you are still very much compelled to read on, because you kind of want to find out what's going on beyond the pages, or what might have happened in the past. Yeah, I thought it was really excellent. I would definitely want to read more of Claire Keegan's books. So yeah, that was that one. And that means I've read all of the books for the Booktube Prize. I have to do some thinking for my rankings, because I'm kind of struggling on how to rank them. I kind of have my top 3 and my bottom 3 in mind. They are kind of set, but within that I'm not sure yet. So I'm gonna have a little think and then come back later. Okay, I'm back with the results. Same place, same outfit, just a day later. And I've done a lot of thinking on how to rank these books, because I wasn't sure how to compare these to each other, because there are such different styles of books. And like, how do you compare something like Carrie Soto is back to Foster to Demon Copperhead? I think it spans a whole range of fiction. So I actually went to the website of the Booktube Prize and had a look at what exactly the prize is, and it says it is a way to pick our favorite books. So not the best book, not the book with the most general appeal, it's your favorite book. So what I did with the rankings is sort of think about how many percentage of the book was my favorite, was the kind of writing that excites me, was the kind of book that made me think, yes, this is why I love books and this is why I love reading. So yeah, that's how I rank these books. So without further ado, here we are. I'm gonna start at my number 6 and then move my way up to my favorite number 1. And like I said before, sort of my bottom 3 and my top 3 were quite clear in my head. It was just in between them that I was struggling. So my number 6 book is Carrie, Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'd say only for like 5% of this book was I excited about this reading. And already I find this interesting because if I would rank it on general appeal, it would get a lot higher. If I would rank it on it being good at what it set out to do, I would rank it a lot higher. But we're ranking on favorites, so number 6 is Carrie, Soto is Back. Number 5, and this is what shocked me the most, I did not expect this book to get so low in my rankings, is Demon Copperhead. You know, this is an absolute booktube darling. Everybody loves this book, but it wasn't for me. I'd say about a quarter of the book excited me. There is definitely a lot of good things about this book, and I definitely get the general appeal, but for me it just never got to the next level. At number 4 I'm going to put Nightcrawling. I realized I haven't really talked about this book in this video, so I'll link down below the video where I've read this book and where you can hear some more of my thoughts. But in general, I loved about the first half of the book. I thought the writing was beautiful, the story really got me engaged, the characters were interesting, and to use the word exciting, it was the writing that excited me a lot. But then in the second half of the book, it sort of loses its way, and I wished it kept its momentum from the first half. So that was my number 4, and now we get into the top 3, so the books that I would like to see move forward to the final. At number 3 I'm going to put Our Wives Under the Sea. It took a little while to get my bearings with this book, but once I sort of got into the flow of it, I really loved it, and I think it has a high readability quality, and that is also always a sign for me of a favorite book. If I have a book that I feel like I could get more things out of on every reread, and I think this is a book that definitely does that a lot. Number 2 is going to be Foster. This I really enjoyed all the way through. It's only a short book, so I guess it's easier to hold your attention if it's only short. And I'd also say that this is a perfect example of a book that maybe wouldn't have gotten so highly ranked if I had to think about it as a general appealing book, because it's the kind of book where not much happens. So I know it's not going to be for everyone, but I really love this style of writing. And then my number 1 is going to be How High We Go in the Dark. This is a book I didn't love all the way through. There was a bit in the middle where it dipped for me a little bit, but I did put it on my number 1 because the parts that I loved, I loved. I loved the writing in this, I love how it made me think, I love how it all interconnected, I love how this is probably a book I could read again and again and again and just be surprised about what I can get out of it and what it teaches me, and just find new little connections in between all these different stories. So yes, that's it, that's my rankings. I hope you all still keep watching this channel, even though I put Demon Copperhead at number 5. I'm very curious at which of the books will move on to the final. I'm really looking forward to seeing other people's videos and see how they rank the books, and you know what sort of that thought process was in ranking the books, because there's so many different ways you could approach this. I had a lot of fun judging this round. I read some really great books. I obviously had some critiques on most of these books, but I still rank all of these books higher than I would my number 2 that I read in the first round. But then also my favorite of the first round, The Marriage Portrait, didn't make it through to the semi-finals. But I still put that in my top 3. So anyway, I feel like I've rambled on enough now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these books, how you would rank them. If you judge the prize as well and you have a video about it, then please tell me, because I love to watch them. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.